Welcome once again to Musings by Danon. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Danon. Normally on this channel we talk about anime and manga, but every once in a while we like to try something different, just to see how things go. And today we're talking about Final Fantasy XIV. What can I say? I'm a sucker for good stories from Japan, and Final Fantasy never disappoints in the story department. For today's video, I want to talk about starting out in the game. Now, for those who watched my previous video, you may find some of this information repetitive, and for that I apologize. This video is designed to be newbie friendly. Quick announcement before we get started. I am once again streaming on YouTube. The plan is to do dual streaming so that I'm live on both Twitch and YouTube at the same time. That being said, Musings by Danon will mostly stay dedicated to anime and manga, with an occasional oddball video thrown in as an experiment, like this one. The new channel, Gaming with Danon, will be dedicated to video games, both content and streaming, with most of the focus being on Final Fantasy XIV. Also, yada yada, like and subscribe, blah blah. With that out of the way, let's get into the video. So, you finally decided to start playing Final Fantasy XIV. Maybe you have a group of friends to play with, maybe you're trying the game out solo. Maybe this is your first MMO, maybe you're a veteran wanting to try something new. Whatever it is, you want to start out at level 1. Yes, you can buy your way to max level if you want to instantly start playing with your friends. But the biggest draw in Final Fantasy XIV is the story, so skipping ahead means you miss out on a big part of the game. Now, something you need to know if you're new to playing MMOs. They are time sinks. You can spend 40 hours a week in this game for years and still not accomplish everything. No, I'm not joking or exaggerating. Out of the 20 million people in the world who have tried Final Fantasy XIV, there is only one person who has completed every single achievement in the game. And the game, in its current iteration, has been out for over a decade. For me, this is the advantage that MMOs have over traditional games. I pay $15 a month for a game that has basically unlimited playability, as opposed to $60 for a game that I beat in 2 weeks. The cost per hour of entertainment in an MMO is ridiculously low. When you're first starting the game, you need to choose a class. You also need to pick a race and what your character looks like, but all of that is cosmetic and can even be adjusted later on down the road. So we'll focus on the starting classes as well as what you want your secondary class to be. Let me explain that real quick. Almost the entirety of Final Fantasy XIV is tied to the main story quest. When you get your mount, when you can fly on your mount, unlocking certain classes, unlocking certain dungeons or raids, side content, almost all of it becomes available as you progress through the story. But the experience points you earn from going through the main story quest are absurd. You could easily level 2 classes almost entirely from just doing the main story quest, or MSQ. You may have to do an extra dungeon now and then to keep both classes leveled up as you progress through the game, but it is otherwise quite easy to level 2 classes at the same time. So which 2 do you level? For the fastest leveling experience, I recommend either a tank or healer as one of your classes, and a DPS as the other. The reason for this is there are a lot of dungeons tied to the MSQ. The average queue time for dungeons is around 5 minutes, depending on how many people are online at a given time. Sometimes it's longer, sometimes shorter, but the median seems to be about 5 minutes. However, tanks and healers are rarely in the queue for longer than a minute. Mind you, this is my experience with 4-player dungeons. 8-player dungeons or trials or 24-man alliance raids can vary wildly. One more thing. Since we're looking at a new player starting with a new character, that means we won't be looking at all of the classes in the game. Several of them are locked either behind the MSQ or behind level requirements. Additionally, all the starting classes in A Realm Reborn evolve into a new class after you've completed their respective level 30 class quest, with one exception. I'll go over the different roles, the positives and negatives of each, and a bit into the specific playstyle of each class, at least from my perspective. Hopefully, it will help you to pick which class you want to play. A tank's job is to take hits from bad guys so that the rest of the party doesn't die. Tanks have heavy armor and lots of hit points, so not only can they take hits, the hits deal less damage to them. They also get cooldowns for added mitigation when bosses have a big attack, or for when they pull the entire dungeon. Tanking in Final Fantasy XIV is incredibly easy. Each tanking class has a tank stance that helps them generate enmity. Enmity is a meter that determines who the enemy is attacking. So long as the tank has their tank stance on, they generate a ton of enmity each time they deal damage. So, to tank a group of enemies, all you need to do is run up to them and smack them around a bit. This will allow the rest of your group to deal damage to them without having to worry about a mob turning around and taking half their life in a single hit. The drawbacks of playing a tank are twofold. The first is that you set the pace of the dungeon, so you need to be out front at all times, racing as fast as possible to stay ahead of the suicidal DPS. I'm looking at you, Dragoons. Your sprint button will basically be on cooldown during the entire dungeon run. So what you want to do is grab the first set of mobs with an AoE attack, then pop your sprint button, and run to the second group. You then activate one of your tanking cooldowns so the mobs don't kill you before your healer has a chance to catch up and start bombing Cure. This can be a bit overwhelming for new players, but you'll get used to it soon enough. The second drawback is how little damage you deal to a single target. There are a ton of quests in the MSQ where you need to kill a single mob. This can take a long time as a tank, as you deal about 30 to 40% less damage to a single target than a DPS does. Fortunately, you can make up for this drawback by pulling multiple mobs. So, some quests will go slower, but others will go faster. Let's take a look at the two starting tanks, Marauder and Gladiator. For the first 30 or so levels, the two classes are very similar. Marauders wield giant axes and smash their opponents, while Gladiators are armed with a sword and shield. But later on, Marauders become warriors who tap into their anger to deal massive attacks, and can even heal themselves. Gladiators evolve into Paladins, who wield the holy magic and can even heal their allies, but not till level 58. Neither class is difficult to play, and while leveling, they both have simple rotations. That being said, Paladin is a bit more complex at higher levels, so really it comes down to aesthetics. Do you want to be a raging warrior with a giant axe, or a holy warrior with a sword and shield? Magical DPS, otherwise known as casters, stand back from the insanity of melee and nuke their enemies with arcane firepower. Whether you're summoning beings of power to crush your enemies, or incinerating them with flames conjured from the void itself, your job is to do one thing and one thing only: kill them before they kill you. After all, the best defense is a good offense. But seriously, let the tank get aggro before you go summoning lightning from the heavens. You're wearing a robe and will get your face smashed in if you try to tank. Casters have the advantage of standing back and seeing the whole picture, rather than being up close and personal like the tanks or melee. That is their strength. It is also their weakness. Final Fantasy XIV has a lot of stack mechanics, where you either need to get right under the boss or stay on top of someone for a shared attack. And if you're off in the far corner of the arena when you're the target, there's a good chance you'll die. So you generally want to be out of melee range, but not in Timbuktu. There are two casters to start, Thaumaturge and Arcanist. Thaumaturge wields a staff and attacks foes with fire, ice, and lightning spells. Most of your damage will come from your fire spells, but the class is balanced so that you can't just spam fire forever. Casting fire spells gains you stacks of astral fire, which causes your fire magic to deal more damage, but also cost more mana. Your mana also does not replenish under astral fire. Meanwhile, ice spells grant you stacks of umbral ice, which causes you to replenish your mana quickly, but ice spells deal significantly less damage than fire. Lightning puts a damage over time effect on the enemy, so it's a good idea to keep that on them as well. Eventually, Thaumaturge evolves into Black Mage, and you start to add the power of the Void to your spells. Your magic is more powerful, and eventually, at later levels, your class becomes very complicated to play. But if you've been practicing while leveling and aren't just jumping into play at level 90, you should be fine. The biggest drawback to playing Black Mage is a near lack of mobility. Despite having several cooldowns that make your spells instacast, most of your time will be spent standing still, hoping an AoE warning doesn't appear under your feet while you're casting Fire 4. But even with that drawback, big numbers are always fun to see. Arcanists use math and strategy to defeat their opponents. They wield tomes and summon Carbuncle to support their casting. Carbuncle can swap between elemental aspects, and changing between them also changes the type of spells the Arcanist casts, as well as the speed at which they cast them. Sometimes they have a bunch of instacast spells that can be cast while moving around. Other times the spells hit harder but have a longer cast time. Eventually you unlock not one, but two classes at level 30. The first is a healer, and we'll talk about that one in a bit, but the second is a summoner. You go from changing the elemental aspect of your Carbuncle to actually summoning elemental titans. This class is very beginner friendly, and I recommend it to anyone new to MMOs who wants to play a caster. The job of a healer is to keep the party alive, not just through healing, but also through shields that can prevent incoming damage. Most of the time, players take damage because they didn't get out of an AoE attack fast enough, but there are plenty of mechanics with unavoidable damage. The question is, are you playing as a regen healer or a shield healer? Shield healers put shields on their party members to soak up some of the damage before those big attacks go off, while regen healers cast heal over time effects to help them get back to full. So long as your party isn't constantly standing in fire, a regeneration effect will heal them back up to full. Now, healing is probably the hardest job for someone new to MMOs to play, and it takes some getting used to in Final Fantasy XIV. Mostly because of the timing difference between 14 and other MMOs, but eventually you'll start to get the hang of things. Now, with tanks doing wall-to-wall pulls, you'll want to pre-cast some heals on them, either a regeneration effect or a shield of some kind, before they pull the first group of mobs. Watch your timing on this, because if you cast it too early, the effect will wear off too quickly. But if you cast it too late, you'll draw hate from the monsters. But once you master healing a tank pulling wall-to-wall in dungeons, everything else will seem easy. Conjurer is the only class in the game that starts as a healer. Your focus is on nature, and using the power of the elements of air and earth to purify your allies and destroy your enemies. Eventually, you unlock White Mage, and start wielding holy magic in addition to earth and wind. And at level 45, you get the best AoE in the game, Holy. Once you have Holy, wall-to-wall pulling becomes super easy. You toss a regen on the tank, dot up the bad guys as you're running from pull to pull, then drop Holy once the tank stops, stunning all your enemies. You then either cast another heal spell or an AoE to top off the party, or a big heal on the tank, and then drop 2 more holy spells. At this point, the mobs should be at about half health, if not lower. Your tank should have a full health bar. At this point, refresh regen on the tank, then either switch to single target DPS or spam holy to finish off the rest of the mobs, depending on the situation. Earlier I mentioned how Arcanist unlocks 2 classes at level 30. The first, Summoner, we already discussed. The second is Scholar. You trade in your Carbuncle for a Fairy, which, in my opinion, is a massive upgrade. Now, Scholars are shield healers rather than regen healers, but your Fairy helps to heal. So, rather than a concentrated heal over time effect on a single party member, your Fairy tosses out heals to everyone in the party. You also have a mechanic called Aether Flow. While in combat, you activate this ability to grant 20% of your mana back, as well as 3 stacks of Aether Flow. Each Aether Flow stack can be used as a powerful healing spell, so be sure to utilize them. Scholar is a bit more complicated than White Mage, but because it's tied to the base class of Arcanist, you have the advantage of leveling both a healer and a caster at the same time. All the experience you gain levels up Arcanist, which in turn levels up both Scholar and Summoner, but you'll want to spend time learning them both. Normally I'd split up ranged and melee here, but there's only one ranged class at the start of the game, Archer. And technically there are only 2 melee as well, at least at the start of the game. Ranged physical damage classes, or ranged for short, have the advantage of being able to constantly keep up their damage while on the move. They don't have cast bars, unlike the casters. So, unlike a black mage, an archer can keep up a steady stream of damage even while running around dodging enemy attacks. Archers eventually evolve into bards, and have a variety of buffs to help their party deal additional damage. Pugilists use punches and kicks to decimate their opponents. They are the masters of martial arts and have no problem sweeping the leg when needed. Eventually, they evolve into monks. Monks have the fastest gameplay in Final Fantasy XIV and deal a lot of damage. The disadvantage is that they have no ranged attacks. So when the boss puts a big danger spot on the ground and forces you out of melee range, you can do nothing but sit there and wait till it goes away. Lancers wield spears to stab and slash their opponents. At level 30, they evolve into dragoons, who leap on high to deal damage to their opponents. Final Fantasy has a long history of dragoons, going back to the early days of the game. The advantage Dragoon has is that it is a very newbie-friendly class. The disadvantage is that when you are leaping back in midair, the game client still sees you as being in your starting point. So if you leap out of danger too late, you can still be killed by the enemy attack. Play this class if you want some of the best looking armor in the game. Finally, Rogue is the only class on this list that you cannot start the game with. But don't worry friends, once you complete your level 15 class quest, you gain the ability to unlock other classes. This is true for all classes. As soon as this happens, you can unlock Rogue. At level 30, Rogue evolves into Ninja, and you start learning from the true Masters of the Shadows. Ninjas are highly mobile and can move around the battlefield quickly and efficiently. Play this class if you always enjoyed sneaking up on your friends and family and scaring them. Finally, the most important part of Final Fantasy XIV, or any video game, is to have fun. Are you enjoying the experience? Do you want to dedicate years of your life to fully unlocking all the story has for you? Or do you enjoy playing cute little puzzle games? Do you want to collect every mount in the game? Or do you want to make your house as pretty as possible? There are a myriad of ways to enjoy Final Fantasy XIV, and I recommend trying as many as possible to find your niche. Because once this game has its hooks in you, it will never let go. Thanks for tuning in. Once again, a huge shout out to my nerd Cute Stuff. I couldn't make these videos without her. If you'd like to hire her to edit your own videos, she can be reached at cutestuff.edits@gmail.com. Link is down below. If you're looking for ways to support the channel directly, you can head on over to patreon.com/Damon. There are several tiers to choose from. You can pick an anime or manga for me to do a video about, or you can join our monthly manga club. I also wanted to give a quick shout out to all of my patrons: Waffles, Jiraiya, Danny, Muffins, Marcus, Squishy, Brett, Roxy, Sean, Pob Zombie, Mark, Borgie, Nazwin, Pedro, Midge, Detroff, Alex, Julio, Michael, Valeri, Apricot, Slowpoke, Conga, and Ignis. You guys are awesome. I post anime or manga videos often, or you can click here to watch additional videos. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again next time on Musings by Damon.